Studios holds such a special place in our hearts because animated films make up some of our most formative movie experiences as kids.
So many kids watch these movies over and over
and over and over and over and over and over.
Why does Hollywood hate animation? As a young adult living in the height of the information age, it feels almost embarrassing to identify animation as my favorite genre of film. Not because animation is solely meant for kids, or any opinion as miseducated as that, but because animation is not just a genre of film. It's a unique form of art that paves the way for new visual styles and surreal stories that simply can't be told by traditional means. Which is why fans of the animation industry took so much offense to this year's Oscars. If not for the Will Smith slap, the words of Halle Bailey, Lily James, and Naomi Scott would be the one to take the internet by storm in its place. And the controversy is not unjustified. Fans of animation have been fighting desperately to shake the stigma of animation being just for kids for decades. So much so that some are hyper-fixated on animation for mature audiences, writing children's animation as inherently lesser storytelling. But despite the genuine works of art made through this medium, the Oscars and the mainstream film community at large simply won't acknowledge animation as anything more than a way to shut their kids up for 2 hours at a time. And they're wrong to view it so close-mindedly. But to say that the stigma itself is false isn't as simple as it sounds. Because if you take the exact words of Halle Bailey at face value, she's kinda right. Animation does make up a plentiful set of formative experience for us in early ages, and that common trait of animation is often held in high regard. Except by the Academy, who, more often than not, don't even bother to watch the nominees for Best Animated Picture. They'll just pick whichever one Disney made and call it a day most of the time. Needless to say, there's a disconnect between the old and the new, and children's animation may just have the explanation as to why.
Dad, I know I can do this. And Mom did too.
The hero's journey is a very commonly known monomyth of film that really needs no introduction, as its presence in stories throughout history is, quite literally, uncountable. The most obvious example of this narrative framework is in the original Star Wars trilogy, and how its story across 3 films are as basic of a hero's journey as one gets. A big part of this journey, both in and out of Star Wars, is the father figure, also referred to as the Abyss by Joseph Campbell in The Hero with a Thousand Faces. For the purposes of this video, we'll refer to the father or the abyss as the parent. The parent is most commonly an authority figure that holds great power or weight in the hero's life, and the hero must make amends with the parent to progress in the story and complete their arc. The parent serves as a narrative stopgap to the hero's progression, challenging their view on the world and oftentimes the validity of their quest or their mission. But the parent is almost never the true antagonist of the story. It's actually quite rare for them to support the antagonist in any way. But they do serve as a defining foil to our hero to make their achievement of the ultimate boon, their completion of the quest, a more definitive success. The hero's journey is important to this topic because it's largely impacted the modern blockbuster long before Star Wars' massive success in 1977. From superhero films to high-budget passion projects and, you guessed it, animation. And this is where animation's impact on children and families shine. Almost every animated film highlights the parent in their use of the hero's journey, and they usually come at it from the same angle.
Even as a boy, I knew what I was, what I had to become. Hiccup is not that boy.
Every parent likes to think that they know their child completely, better than the child knows themselves. This myth that parents deem as fact is, plainly speaking, false. A person barely knows themselves 100% of the time, let alone their child or parent. But this gap in communication is what makes a child's growing years so tense and filled with emotion as they desperately try to become their own person while the parent tries to do what's best for them, whether the child knows it or not. And the growing pain of the child standing up and seeing that the parent truly doesn't know what is best is both a call to action and a rude awakening. It's from this common theme of emotional disconnect that the identity of the parent is so easily relatable to child and adult. For even if the emotional disconnect is minimal, children will always disappoint their parents in some way. And parents will often project this disappointment to the child, either passively,
it's time to give up this inventing thing, get a real job,
or in the worst cases, aggressively.
There. No guitar, no music.
This is the challenge that our hero faces, what urges them to progress in the hero's journey, the foil to their ideology, the narrative counter that seeks to disprove the hero's argument. You can't be a Viking, you can't be an inventor, you can't be a musician, you can't be a Jedi, you can't be a hero. This form of the parent entices our hero to action and simultaneously makes the viewer believe that they can be whoever they wish to be, even if our parents say no. This is a very traditional use of the parent in children's animation, and it's been used this way for decades. But a duo of recently released animated works have put a new style of parent on center stage. And funny enough, they come from the one animation studio that the Oscars are aware of.
Trying to make me be like you? Well, I'm not going to be like you.
Disney and Pixar's recent releases of Encanto and Turning Red are two more additions to the long list of Hero's Journey users, and suffice to say, they fulfill the role perfectly. Both films follow a young girl seeking to make her place in the world while struggling to fit the expectations of their female parental figures at the same time. And though Turning Red is far more expressive in how it presents its themes, it shares with Encanto two key differences in its use of the parent that most of the films do not. Firstly, the child believes that the ultimate boon is to be what the parent wants them to be. The child must learn that they must be who they want to be, whether or not it's a disappointment.
I will never be good enough for you.
The second difference is that unlike other films used in this video, the parent is not simply a stopgap. Stoic, Eleanor, Tim, and Mama Imelda are all narrative foils to our hero, the child, but they're not the true villains. But Encanto and Turning Red make it clear that the antagonistic force of the story is the emotional disconnect between parent and child. For all intents and purposes, Alma and Sandra aren't even supporters of the villain. They are the villain and the parents. And rather than being beaten, they're redeemed so that the antagonistic force itself can be defeated, fulfilling both the purposes of the parent and the boon. These films are all excellent lessons in parenting, as well as helpful advice for a child to live a happy life, what with puberty and high school lurking around the corner. These are the animated works that make children's life easier. But for a medium so focused on children, there's a lot of parental critique mixed in here. Why is that? Star Wars is the dictionary definition of the hero's journey. Its hero, its goddess, and whatever role Chewbacca fills are all perfectly indicative of what a hero's story is thought to be by most people. But it fails in its use of the parent. Campbell defines the atonement with the Abyss as a moment of understanding between the hero and the father, or in our terms, child and parent. Star Wars achieves this by having Vader betray his master to save his son's life, fulfilling the boon of saving Vader and defeating the villain. But that's hardly an atonement. In the first movie, Vader is presented to the audience as irredeemable, an insidious dark lord of the Sith that kills without mercy and is unchallenged in power. It's this very mask that Vader wears that makes his reveal as Luke's father so shocking. But atoning for his crimes against the galaxy cannot be as simple as just saving his son. Yes, he defeats the villain, but he did so out of parental obligation to protect the child. That hardly counts for the buckets of red in his ledger shown in the first trilogy, and that's not even considering his actions throughout the prequels. Was Vader saved? Yes, but his atonement falls flat as, though Vader does turn to the light and to his son, he does so out of an impulse decision. He doesn't admit that the Empire was wrong in its crimes against the galaxy, nor was his decision to turn a calculated one. It was impulsive and without closure. There's no admission of flaw, no apology. Vader was saved, but he wasn't redeemed. Because for a character to be redeemed, they must say one of the hardest sentences for any human to sincerely say.
I'm sorry.
To plainly admit to one's own incompetence, even if from a past event, is disgusting to anybody. But it's such an important piece of any atonement or understanding between parent or child. There must be apology and admission of flaw from either or even both parties. This is an incredibly common theme in and out of animation, but animation has the advantage of being marketed primarily to kids. Kids get to see what a mistake and a subsequent apology looks like, and chances are the adults will see it too. The tricky part is whether the adults will listen.
For For once in your life, would you please just listen to me?
This is where we reach the crux of the issue between the animation industry and the Oscars. The cruel irony here is that if fans of animation are the children in this metaphor, the film industry is the parent. Because the people who run the Academy, the parents in the stories of young creators and directors, are dead set in never admitting to their flaws, especially if they're stubborn or old-fashioned, or if they're parents. Most parents will adhere to the rule that they must never appear incompetent or incorrect to the child, even if the child already knows that they are. This is what animation has to offer. Not just formative content for children, but formative content for everyone. All ages, all backgrounds, all demographics, including the parents who need to learn to say, I was wrong, I'm sorry. And hopefully, sometime soon, we can get the chance to see the Academy atone the right way.